You are listening to Missed Apex Podcast. We live F1. Welcome to Missed Apex Podcast. I'm your host, Richard Reddy, but my friends call me Spanners, so let's be friends. We've dropped in for a midweek recording to look back at some Canadian Grand Prix memories, and we'll ask what makes the Grand Prix track stand out amongst others. And we've also drafted in a 50% Dutch panel for you today so we can zoom in on the reigning champ and find out what people in the Netherlands really think of him and why he is so popular amongst his fans. We are an independent podcast produced in the podcasting shed with the kind permission of our better halves. We aim to bring you a race review before your Monday morning commute. We might be wrong, but we're first. First up is the least interesting and exciting person in this week's lineup. It's just the normal, ordinary Matt Trumpets. How's it going, Matt?
Nothing but straights, chicanes, and a hairpin. That's it. Your favorite track.
I do like the Canadian Grand Prix, even though it's fully populated by chicanes, and it would be easy to say I was a hypocrite because I said I wanted all chicanes banned, and that seems to be what you're implying.
Well, it would have been easy, except for, of course, you just said it.
Curses, he flipped it around on me. Also joining me is the much nicer and much more favourable in my eyes, Jules Sagers from the Netherlands. Hey, Jules.
Good evening, guys. Hi.
Hi, and you are, it's not tokenism, Jules, just because it's a Verstappen special. I didn't just draft in the nearest Dutch people I could find.
It didn't feel like it when I was invited on, so it's all good.
Okay, good. And the second nearest Dutch person I could find, I'm delighted to be joined by the gaffer of the top Dutch language F1 podcast. It's Lucas Dagan from the Race Reporter podcast. Welcome, Lucas.
Hi, nice to be on your show again. Thank you.
Well, yeah, thank you. We didn't put you off last time because sometimes, believe it or not, the internet says that we're not always that friendly or praising enough of Max Verstappen. So I'm glad you could cross the water and be with us, Lucas.
Yeah, no problem.
But in honor of our half Dutch panel, let's start by talking about Supermax. So believe it or not, I am actually not someone that specifically dislikes Max Verstappen. I promise. However, in the world of sport, I believe we can allow ourselves to be fans of a team or of a particular athlete. And in the context of that, we can allow ourselves to have rivals. Cough, Ferrari. Your driver is always a hero, and the other driver is just a bum in a rocket ship. And to an extent, I think we can allow ourselves that. It's a fantasy, it's part of the game, it's an escape, and it's all good fun, isn't it? To a point. And I've also accepted that, for my part, getting some heat from our Dutch friends is a part of that. And I believe, the Hamilton fans giving me grief when Hamilton was dominating is also all part of that. Because on both sides of this fence, one of the strangest criticisms that we've had is our response to this kind of car domination that both Hamilton and Verstappen have enjoyed. It's not emphatic enough for the fans of each driver. We don't credit the driver enough for bringing home a fast car. So as Hamilton fans, we've had that as well. But now Verstappen fans have finally reached the promised land. So I would like to ask you, Lucas, how does it feel for long-standing Max Verstappen fans? Like, the dream has been completed. You're here. It was a relatively slow journey to the top. Actually, you've had to be particularly patient, but here we are. Manna from heaven.
Here we are. Well, it's mixed feelings because yes, I'm happy. We are all happy, but it's funny that you said so because I think this week I was watching the first Grand Prix of Max Verstappen with his Toro Rosso. And it's a completely different Max Verstappen. Back then we were still hoping, and now it's typical Dutch. Like we scored the points, and now we're here, and now we get a little bit of arrogant. I don't know if that's the right word, but
comfortable. Yeah,
comfortable, and we're expecting Max to be champion the upcoming years, and it's we should still feel hungry. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I'm really happy that we're here. Of course, it's been wonderful.
Yeah, so Jules, I mean, was there a sense of inevitability in the Netherlands that like it was only a matter of time before Max became champion? And that's what everyone was saying. And I was thinking like, well, it's not a foregone conclusion. But honestly, like the Verstappen fan base were like, there was never a doubt. He's definitely a future multiple world champion.
Yeah, I think trying to go back to the time when he was rocketed into Formula One in the Toro Rosso, and everybody was told like this is an exceptional talent and he's so young. That was pretty much the main reason for people to start believe like, wow, he's so young. He's the youngest Formula One driver ever. It must be special, because you need to remember that for a sense of history of the sport and some kind of reference framework, that it's not really here. We're not a big motorsport country. So he was quickly framed as like, this is the next big thing coming. He's exceptional. It's something we've never seen before. And then it was only boosted by him getting his first win in like his, not even after a season and a half, getting that Red Bull drive and getting that first win. And then from then on, I think Lucas can underline that. It's just gone.
It's exploded. Crazy. So I think like when it's someone that you're watching from a junior series, I think British F1 fans, we forget that there was actually quite a dearth of British F1 talent for a while. So post Damon Hill, Damon Coulthard, not quite, getting there, being behind Mika Hakkinen. And I was thinking about this earlier. I think there was a time where there was a couple of seasons with no British driver. I'm pretty sure. And I think then Anthony Davison in his BMW was the only British driver for a season. I think I'm gonna get fact checked on that for sure.
Was it Honda?
Oh, maybe for Honda.
Super Aguri.
Oh, Super Aguri, of course.
Yeah.
And then when Jenson Button came in and Lewis Hamilton came in, there was a lot of excitement. So we were keeping an eye on Lewis Hamilton coming through F2 or GP2, whatever it was at the time. And you go, yeah, there's this phenomenal talent coming up. So we weren't surprised. But I think to the Dutch audience, Lucas, we were surprised when everyone was clamoring to sign a 17-year-old driver. And you go, well, why? Why is Mercedes fighting for him? Why is Red Bull fighting for him?
Well, yeah, I don't want to be like arrogant, but if you watch the races of Max Verstappen in the Toro Rosso, you could see like, wow, this is really special. You remember the drift he did at Brazil, where he like almost the last corner, he touched the curves, and everybody knew that this was something special coming. So yeah, it's a diamond. And I love watching Max Verstappen in the Toro Rosso. That was so special. I really love that. And I always said also in my podcast that I don't care how many times he becomes world champion. The first win and the first championship is for me is the most special. And of course, the race in Brazil. The rain one.
Is that the one where he nearly crashed? Oh,
yep.
Oh, right, yeah. So, but yeah, he was praised for doing one of the best crash avoidances ever. Okay, that's fine. He's undoubtedly good in the rain. But actually, Lucas, what impressed in that race was the gap between him and Daniel Ricciardo? Like they were pretty level. Then the rain came down. And, you don't pay attention.
I just know that he overtook Rosberg on the outside, and he spun, and he was almost running into the wall. Then let go of the brakes and corrected, and that he said, heartbeat went a little bit higher there. It was so cool. That was like, and now actually I think he's so grown up. He's so cool, and he knows exactly what he does. What was the last time Max Verstappen made a mistake? I don't even remember.
Hungary last year. That's the last.
Did you know how he corrected that?
Straight out and back out. Jules.
Yeah, I remember I had to write a piece on him when it was announced that he was going to be picked up by Red Bull and going to be driving Formula One at 16 years old. And I pulled a parallel between how his father, Jos Verstappen, entered Formula One in a top team, but also had test drives for McLaren, among others. And so that aspect of him being the son of Jos,
Yes.
people kind of knew that he had been doing great in the karting series. That brought something special as well, because Jos Verstappen was the guy who put Formula One back on the map in the Netherlands. It waned a bit after that, but that aspect of the Max Verstappen story definitely contributed to, at least here, it became a thing quite quickly.
Matt.
Well, the interesting thing to me is to see the fact that, to my memory, when Max came into the sport, he was the first person I saw come into the sport since Hamilton with that kind of a fanfare around him.
Mm.
And so if you just go back and look at his junior record, you can see why people were excited about him, given the amount of wins that he had for the number of races that he did. But the big difference here is that he came into the sport, and I think this is really to his credit. He came into the sport with a lot of hype, but with almost no testing relative to what Hamilton was able to get when he came in. Now, we all know Hamilton came in after that glorious drive from the back that riveted everybody in the F1 paddock as he made it in GP2, as you mentioned there, Spanners. But for Max to come in and walk into a team at that age and be able to achieve that level of consistency, it really is remarkable. I mean, hats off to him, because I wasn't sure at all, because I felt like the hype train was clouding up the reality. But no, he absolutely delivered on it.
So there's a couple of things where that demonstrate how good Verstappen was when he came in, and actually how good Leclerc is. But people were saying, if a 17-year-old can drive an F1 car, F1 cars must be super easy to drive. And the remedy to that would be, okay, cool, let's get all the 17-year-olds in F3 and let's just stick them in F1 cars now and see if that's good. And there was a similar one with Leclerc, who drove one-handed while trying to fix his mirror around 130R at Suzuka, and everyone, oh, it's so easy, you can drive one-handed. No, Leclerc can drive one-handed, you can't. Lucas.
Well, actually, it reminds me of, I met the father of Jos Verstappen. I meant the grandfather of Max Verstappen in Montfort. And he had a small ice company, what is it called? Ice cream store.
Nice.
And I was sitting with him outside having an ice cream. And actually, he wasn't convinced about how it would end up. He said, well, I know what the press were going to say, because for years, the Dutch press were really hard on Jos Verstappen when he ended up in the grid and the grind, we call in Dutch, what is called the gravel.
Oh,
so his granddad was so insecure about the talent of Max, because he said, well, because of the pressure he felt. And I said, no, come on, Max is so great, it's gonna be fine. But I can still feel his insecurity because of all the press they put on Jos. That was actually kind of sad to see.
Oh, yeah, we never saw that perspective. So Jos Verstappen, from our perspective, from a non-Dutch perspective, he was a good midfield driver. Probably, though, most famous for that explosion picture where the fuel pump was, half off, and he had that spectacular pit lane explosion. But he never set like the F1 world alight. But yet he's such a powerful figure now, it seems, going forward in F1 almost like as a manager. He's like a huge influence in F1.
Yeah, but you gotta know that Dutch people are very, very critical.
No,
do
you know what, Lucas? I am learning that over the last few years. I have learned that. You're very direct as a people. Is that fair? Is that fair?
Yeah, true.
Yeah. But look, you guys have gone through that journey. I'm glad we had a little bit of a reminisce, because it's easy to forget how young he came in, and people say, well, he's still young, he's still a kid, but he has actually been in F1 for, what is this, seven seasons, I think. Someone do some maths for us, but it's been a long, it's been
2015, so it's 8 8 years?
8 years. So he's been eight seasons in Formula One. For example, if you're a Hamilton fan, you had to wait 1 year for a title fighting season straight away. 2007, he was right in there fighting for the title. Then 2008, bam, he gets that. But he could easily have gone through 2007, 2008 without a title. And then you'd have had some wilderness years scrapping around, and then the build-up year with Mercedes. And that's kind of what Verstappen fans have had to wait for. But the question I want to pose to you now is, now that we're here, now that we're in the promised land, does the Verstappen fan base feel the pressure that I think Hamilton fans have had over the years as well, which is, how do you justify your driver's performance in a dominant car where, you know, perhaps you don't have to push, you don't have to do that last 10%, and you have people going, well, the Red Bull is an absolute rocket ship, and F1 has always been to some extent the car. It doesn't mean Max isn't driving well or pushing. Is there a dissatisfaction amongst the fan base with that kind of advantage, or is it all just windmills and tulips? Well, we can put that to anyone. Jules?
Yeah, I think, as Lucas mentioned earlier, the word might not be arrogance or more used to Max winning, and I feel, but that's just me going on what I see on social media, in the regular media. Some kind of satiation, is that the word? Like you're satirized, you're fulfilled.
Satiation.
Yeah,
Like
satiation.
filled.
Yeah,
like I'm filled
sated.
with the accomplishment.
Satiation.
Yeah.
And that's what you kind of sense. It's becoming the norm. Like it's normal that Max is winning now, and I'm afraid Maria in the live chat just asked, like, how many of the Dutch Formula One viewers would you reckon would drop out if Max would quit or wouldn't win anymore? And I think a vast amount of them would lose interest in the sport if there's not a Dutch driver or a Dutch successful driver. And but still, despite this satiation, the minute when Hamilton starts to become a rival again, or starts matching him, like we saw in Spain the other day, you immediately sense this old rivalry firing up on the socials, in the tone of voice of the TV commentators.
Even Horner as well. You could just
you immediately sense like everyone can be fast, but if Hamilton's fast, they he's in a gets special treatment.
Matt.
Well, I wanted to ask this question because I think it wouldn't be surprising if I said, well, you know, if for any driver of nationality to win a lot of championships and then leave the sport, a certain number of people will leave with that driver because they were only there because they were supporting him for national reasons. But I'm curious, do you think Formula One could do anything to help sort of convert some of those Max-only fans into general Formula One fans? Is this a special Dutch problem, or do you think it's just always going to be that way no matter what?
Yeah, Lucas, Jules gone, sorry.
Oh, yes. I think what you saw in Germany when Michael Schumacher quit, I think you'd see a similar kind of thing when Max or Senna as well would quit. Still, I think the way Formula One is covered in the media, how it has conquered a spot within the sports pages, how it's become a topic on social media, in talk shows, definitely a part of those fans would stick around, because, you know, it's one thing entering the sport because of Max Verstappen, but I'm positive Dutch are sports lovers. They love sports. They love to feast because of sports, to become a following. So yeah, I'm convinced some of them would stick, definitely.
Lucas?
Yeah, well, it's true. We love football, we love cycling, Tour de France, we love ice skating. But actually, I think there are 3 or 4 Formula One fans. The real Formula One fan, the Max Verstappen fans, that if Max Verstappen leaves, then they will leave, and the Drive to Survive. Uh,
Yeah.
so, yeah, I went to Spa-Francorchamps like for years. And I could see and feel like the new Max Verstappen fans were coming. And I would call them the football fans
Right.
that started watching
Yes.
Formula One. And I didn't like that, actually, because they didn't know anything about Formula One. They didn't even know what a yellow flag was. So I hope we can convert them to Formula One fans. But on the other hand, if they leave, I actually wouldn't mind, if you know what I mean.
So are we talking about the flares? Is that part of it? Is that part of it?
Yeah, and the beer drinking.
Yeah. Hey, whoa, let's go easy on the beer drinking.
No, but you know what I mean. We love this sport and we watch it and we talk about it in a podcast. But there are so many people that don't know anything about Formula One and they're just a fan because of Max, which is fine. But yeah.
Yeah,
but I think that's also with Senna and Schumacher. I think that's not typical Dutch.
So we don't want to, gatekeep. I think all fans are welcome in our house as long as you take your shoes off and wash your hands before dinner. That's all good, and maybe park the flares every now and then. So yeah, it's inevitable that like the German fan base seemed to disappear when Schumacher left. And and was failed to be recaptured by Vettel, and I'm sure every nation would just have that kind of sporting default when you've got an athlete of yours doing incredibly well, you suddenly get into it. My goodness, it happens all the time in the Olympics. Like, are we a big ski jumping nation? No, but when Eddie the Eagle Edwards was there doing ski jump 4 years in, 4 years out, we supported him. So it's not rare for a fan base to jump behind a particular athlete. So I think that's okay. So I'm definitely not gatekeeping that. And to an extent, like certainly if Lewis Hamilton quits, there will certainly be a huge chunk of people who were only really interested in Lewis Hamilton doing well. So I'm sure that's fine. But you will now have to deal as a fan base, Lucas, and I'm making you a representative of all Verstappen fans. You're now having to kind of deal with like a lot of stuff that an incumbent champion deals with. So I did notice that he got accused of tax evasion. So welcome to the club. Hamilton fans have had to deal with that for a long time. But yeah, obviously that's the price of finally reaching the pinnacle, the mountain. I just wanted to ask you from the other side to Jules and Lucas, like, how is Hamilton seen in the Netherlands generally? Is he the Darth Vader that I always thought that Schumacher was?
What do you mean with Darth Vader?
Like the big bad. Is he like the big enemy of the sport?
Oh, no, you mean like
the pantomime villain?
Well, if I may begin, a yes and no. When I was in Zandvoort, the first time it was in Zandvoort, people were clapping, paying respect to Lewis, because you can't have not respect for someone that's 7-time world champion or 7.5. But personally, I love the Lewis in the McLaren and not the Lewis in the Mercedes, because I sometimes I think, man, come on, stop crying on the radio. But that's just personal. No, I think the Dutch really respect him, but there's also people that like every time he says this is the best crowd on the planet, Twitter blows up. Like, so I don't know.
Maybe he just means it. Maybe each time he loves the crowd increasingly. All right, let's go to some of the Twitter responses, guys. So open spoil, I've categorized this. I asked on Twitter, if you're a Max Verstappen fan, what do you love about Verstappen? And we had way more responses than I thought I would get. And if you're a Verstappen fan who tunes into Missed Apex, thank you. Thank you for putting up with me, I guess. So one big part was aggression. So we had Eric, Mimi, Geordie, Ian, and Sukiwi getting in touch and saying, well, Eric says, I like his aggressive style. He's not afraid of going after the king. I respect Lewis, but he went after him, and now it's his aggressive consistency, willing to take risks and not making mistakes. Mimi, I'm a big fan of aggressive wheel-to-wheel racing. That's what attracted me to Max. Geordie, Max is entertaining to watch, isn't afraid to go to the limits. Ian Turner cheekily says his ability to withstand 51G. And Suiki Kiwi says he's always honest, no BS, understated sense of humor, an amazing racer that goes to the maximum. This is it, Jules, though, isn't it? This has been the definition of Max Verstappen. He came into a gentleman's sport and ruffled feathers immediately.
True. He felt like he was inadjusted, like socially. I don't know the exact English word for that, but like he didn't say the things that we are all used to Formula One drivers say. You know, like the appropriate things, the conventional stuff. He was a unique individual. It seemed, even at that age. So that went for the things he said on team radio, the way he took on Carlos Sainz while being a rookie, and you know,
forgot about that.
Transcended to his driving style. You know, we all know there are rules brought into the sport, regulations, because of Max's driving, and I think a part of Formula One viewers or fans think he's too much. He's over the top with that, but a lot of Formula One fans like that. You know, how do you say this? This pure way of driving, relentless.
Relentless. Oh, that's true, Matt. Relentless is a fair word.
Well, sort of what I love about this, and to me, like what Jules just said there, this is like the classic reason people say they liked Kimi Räikkönen, for example. He just said things. They weren't the correct things. They weren't the incorrect things. It was literally like what he was going to do the next second. It didn't matter. People liked it because it was just different to your standard sort of apologies to Chris Stevens here, sort of PR speak that the drivers tend to be programmed with when they get sent out to the media bullpens and whatnot. But your comment about his driving, I also love. I said this about Alonso too. He has a certain ability to find the legal limit of rules that most people wouldn't think to explore. And I'm going to bring the sport of hockey into this briefly. There was a player, I think for the Rangers, who got an entire rule written for him because he realized there was no rule against standing directly in front of the goalie and literally just like smacking him in the head with a stick or something like that. And he did this in a game, the Rangers won it, and then they immediately changed the rule to keep any player from ever doing it again. And his genius was he just realized like, oh, well, I can actually do this, and it's going to make it a lot easier for my team to win.
Like that NASCAR guy that did the wall run towards the end
exactly.
Of the race.
Wow.
Lucas.
I have another example. Silverstone 1999. Schumacher. He got the black flag or the black and white or the whatever, and he just finished the race in the pit stop.
In the pit lane, yes.
That was amazing, and that's I think exactly example.
Okay, but does Verstappen go too far? Because in his youth, in his build-up, like he was happy to hit his own teammate in China. He was happy to run roughshod over people. He was happy to cut in front of Ricardo at Baku. Like, did you guys, as fans, did you ever think, "Oh, come on, Max, you're going too far there"?
Jules.
Definitely.
Yeah, I know Jules will agree. Go on, you go first, Jules. Then Lucas can make the case.
No, definitely. I think we all know the examples of when Max would, in my opinion, go too far. Brazil when he drove Hamilton off the track, and that was not the only time, but also other examples of him being so unadapted, which was the word I was looking for, and relentless, that you can't demand people to leave you space or create space for you and not think that goes the other way around. And that's where he crosses the line for me.
Well, I think you need to cross the line to know where the line is. And the only thing I really didn't like was Brazil last year with Perez. Come on.
Oh,
we're
not
driving
letting
as a team
Yes, yeah.
for points. But besides from that, I agree. But this is Formula One, and we're not friends. We don't have to, it's a fight. It's like gladiators. So yeah, sometimes yeah,
Go on, Jules.
it's racing.
But then, on the other hand, somewhere you have to admire him for that, because Michael Schumacher, Ayrton Senna,
Yep.
even Seb Vettel, multi 21. You need these villain-esque behaviors that make you stand out. That apparently often create the world champions.
True. One small thing. I think that Russell is acting to be that like that, because he used to
100%.
be really nice
Yep.
in Williams, but now he's thinking like, oh, I have to be like Max calls him a D-head. I think that's what Russell is trying to do now. Like, okay, let's use the elbows and then I'm going to be champion.
Russell is 100%. He is in that mode. He's fooled everyone with his British plumminess. Like, oh, let's go for a lovely drive in the race cars. Oh dear, I seem to have slammed Bottas into a wall. I'll just touch his helmet to make sure he's okay.
Yeah.
But no.
Yeah.
Russell is an absolute weapon. Absolutely, trust me. He is definitely in that vein. And actually, listening to this, I think a lot of Hamilton fans are often disappointed that older Lewis Hamilton doesn't leave a foot in like he used to. So, like, Hamilton definitely went through this phase where he was a menace, not so much in the championship early fighting years, but then, like, subsequently 2009, particularly 2011. He was hitting everyone. He was hitting Maldonado. He seemed to hit Massa 7 times a race. And he definitely went through that phase. And I think he copped an awful lot of criticism for that kind of heart on the sleeve driving. And it was almost like he took it personally. And now he really goes out of his way. Like, now he's probably one of the cleanest drivers on the grid. He never wants to get in any confrontation, especially on lap 1. We'll do the risk reward calculation and be on the cautious side, let someone through. And, as Hamilton fans, we sometimes can find that frustrating. So, you do want that in a racer, but Verstappen, I think, just took it to the extreme, Matt. But my criticism was never for Max doing that. It was always that the stewards allowed it. But I just feel like the rest of the grid took a really long time to catch up and go, look, if Max is allowed to do that, you're allowed to do that as well.
Well, yeah. And I honestly love the fact, and I've made this point before, that if you want to win a race, never mind win a world championship, you have to, when you are in competition, you have to have the mind of an absolute killer, of a mob boss. You have to be the Pablo Escobar of the peloton. Since Lucas brought up cycling, I'm watching this great documentary on Netflix, sort of their drive to survive for the Tour de France. And it made me think of Lance Armstrong, of course, disgraced for doping, which everybody was doing. But there was a moment where he was racing his pure rival, Jan Ullrich. They really were very evenly matched. And they're halfway up some just brutal climb. And Lance turns around and looks at Jan. And it's called The Look. You can go Google it right now. He looks at him. You can see he smells blood. He senses weakness. And he turns around and just rides away from him. He's like, I don't care how much this is going to hurt me. It's going to hurt you more. Therefore, I'm going to do it. And I love the idea that we project onto these people in these arenas with these artificial rules, our ideas of civility and how people should behave. But if you want to win, and, I think we have our own missed apex equivalent and Brad sometimes, you have to really be willing to find the very edge of the rules and do things that are, well, let's just use the color gray, perhaps, to represent them.
And so I think when Hamilton and Verstappen kind of met, they met at different points in their careers. So maybe they met in 2021 with Hamilton just like still great, but just past like his maximum peak. Just age is a thing. No one at me. And Verstappen still on his way up, his peak yet to find. But they met at a time where Hamilton had spent years giving Verstappen room, because he wasn't a title rival. And then when it was a real title fight, he still did that. And that was disappointing. There should have been times where Hamilton should have stuck his nose in, left his foot in, or just let Max hit him. Like imagine like Brazil. That was 2021, wasn't it? With the turn 4, let them race. What do you think, Lucas? If one of those occasions, even in Abu Dhabi, what if Hamilton had just stood his ground and just let Verstappen hit him?
Well, first I want to go back to Imola in the rain, the first lap.
Yeah.
I still can't believe that Lewis didn't hit Max over there. And I don't care. Let him hit him. Just like Baku, Daniel and Max. I enjoyed it. That's what I'm watching Formula One for. I'm watching a show. I don't care who wins.
It's a good show. But, and actually, just to think if, not too much from a Hamilton perspective, even when Hamilton was battling Rosberg, we were on this podcast or earlier version of it, Matt. And we were saying, like, we wish Rosberg would just hold his ground because Hamilton just kept running him off the track.
Yeah, well, and this is the thing. This is what that sort of behavior counts on, is accommodation from the other rider. And I love it. And this is the thing about Formula One and about all sports. At that moment, it's an extremely high stakes game of poker. Each side has made a bet, and you either go all in or you fold.
All right, I have a small question.
All right.
Adelaide 1994, Jerez 1997. Is that what we want? Schumacher driving into Damon Hill, driving into Jacques Villeneuve? Because that's for me, that's over the edge.
That's a stewarding issue.
But maybe we shouldn't get into it.
No, let's get into it. No, you can't bring up 94 without me getting into it.
Where does it end? Is my question.
I'll be honest with you, Lucas. Right, Abu Dhabi 2021. The hurt of that is somewhat like muted by the fact that I was still mad about 94. Like I still hadn't got over that. And you go, that's just a stewarding issue. So they got the stewarding wrong. The Schumacher should have just been disqualified from the race and the championship, to be honest. But that did happen in 97. It's easier to disqualify someone from second than it is from first place. That's all I'll say. So you're right. I shouldn't get into it. What I should do is get back to these great tweets about why people like Verstappen. And then we're going to move on to looking at Canada very shortly. Kale says, he just loves racing more than anyone on the grid. He wakes up, he goes sim racing, race weekend, he goes home, he plays on the sim again. He enjoys it so much, and he's the reason I started watching in 2017, and I have been a fan since. And Lucas, I gather you're not a fan of the Sims?
I do sim.
Of him sim racing, of Max simming.
Yeah, what's wrong with that? I like it.
Oh, okay, good. Yeah, but he does seem to like literally eat and sleep and breathe racing.
Yeah. Well, he's still young. Let him be a kid also. Like have a parallel life. Like be young and that's okay.
His outright speed appeals to me, says Neil. The moment he got into F1, I'm an old dude who's watched a lot of amazing drivers, but Max has the ability to put the car where the car wants to be, and that's not always the perfect racing line. He seems to just find the speed. Reminds me a lot of Michael Schumacher. So here's a question I'll put to you guys. When it comes to this that Neil has pointed out, just pure out-and-out speed, I do feel that Formula One's drivers aren't on the same out-and-out quality of field that, say, soccer is at or professional 100-meter sprint. So they are sports where there's a high participation and you've pretty much narrowed down to the best that a human being can do, and you have really competitive fields. I don't think we've got 20 drivers on the same level. The gap is actually quite big. Who's on the Verstappen level of out and out speed? Let's go with Jules. Jules, who's on? I'm assuming you agree Verstappen is that top level of the current field of speed. Who else is at that level?
Fully agree. I'd say only 3 drivers, him, Hamilton and Alonso. And some might find Alonso arguable.
Yeah.
And I could agree with that as well. But apart from that, I think there's a pretty large gap to a bunch of them.
Yeah.
And then you have like the bottom.
So I think a lot of people would put Leclerc in that if we're saying that top 4. But that does mean there is room for a driver to stand out. So for example, I don't know, if you put go-karts in every primary school, obviously I think you should have 20 drivers at the pace of Verstappen. But where the sport is now, you see a driver with that out and out speed, and he's been kind of bred differently and can get the most out of the car. We are seeing something. We are seeing something special. And then Mark Nicholson addresses the elephant in the room. Why do you love Max Verstappen? The answer for most of them is that he's Dutch. The Belgians seem to have ignored their association with him, and he's a winner. That seems to be sufficient, and I think that's fine. In sport, I think you're completely allowed the shortcut where you support the local athlete, the local driver. I'm a Colchester United fan. Coincidentally, they happen to be the greatest team ever. It's just a coincidence that I was born nearby. But I accept that might look to some people like I just supported them because I live next door. Lucas?
Oh, yeah, just a small question to Matt. You are from America, right?
America.
So were you a
yeah.
big fan of Andretti?
Was I a bit of Mario, you mean?
No, in Formula One. It's Michael, I think.
Oh, well, you mean the current Formula One bit?
Yeah. So when in 1993?
Oh, in 93. Well, you managed to hit that point in time where I was watching cycling instead of Formula One.
Okay.
Or paying attention. Well, paying attention. There was no Formula One available for me at that time.
Okay.
But I was a big fan of Mario when Mario was in Formula One. That's kind of how old I am. How about that?
Okay.
All right, Matt, what say you that we look forward to the next, probably, wet Grand Prix? I think we can do it. Let's do it. I don't need your permission. I'm just going to decide. Yeah, that's right. I'm the best one. You should follow me and Matt, though. We're all right on social media. I'm at Spanners Ready, and Matt is at MattPT55. And you put all our links handily in the show notes. So on your app, swipe left or right. Or on YouTube, scroll down and you'll see all the links there. And we should get these guys' social media links as well. Lucas, where do we find you on Twitter?
Lucas Deacon.
DEGEN. There we go. And link in the show note below. And it's at Jules Sagers F1.
Correct. Yes.
Also,
no F1. Just Jules
at
Sagers.
Jules Sagers. All right, cool. And remember,
he doesn't need the F1.
Exactly. And remember, if you want to encourage this general kind of thing, support us on Patreon, patreon.com/Missed Apex. Or if you think we're doing a brilliant job and you want to specifically buy me or Matt the equivalent of a pint or a cup of coffee, it's missedapexpodcast.com/tip jar. And anything that keeps us from being... We could be taken over any minute by one of the big conglomerates. You don't want that, do you? Come and support Missed Apex Podcast. Or do we want that, Matt? Do we want to sell out?
I don't know. For $550 million, I might have to think about it.
$1 billion and we're in. Let's look forward to the Canadian Grand Prix. I have asked some of our panel to talk about their Canadian Grand Prix memories, and 2011 is the one that comes up most often. And thank you so much, Lucas, for sharing a link with me. And I sat and I watched an extended highlights of the 2011 Grand Prix, and it just transported me to a different time, Lucas. Kobayashi versus Massa. Michael Schumacher clutching second place mid-race. An absolutely chaotic race and definitely a Canada classic.
Wow. That was, I think, maybe the best race I've ever seen.
Yeah, and all the way through, like you couldn't have called that from a long way out.
No, I think we had to stop for a few hours, actually, because it was raining so hard. Did it?
Yeah, it started. There was definitely a red flag. I can't remember if there was more.
I think it was the longest Grand Prix ever. I'm not sure about that.
And that's probably why they brought in the rule that, 4 hours and we're done. Because TV scheduling starts to get into the way. But the famous one from that is always the Button win. So Jenson Button, Jenson Button Jules, I think he had, Matt, sorry. What was it? Three pit stops and a drive-through and then one.
I don't care because you made me watch the highlights. I just need to point out to everyone who remembers this solely as Button's laudatory drive to an irresistible victory that literally on the last lap, foreshadowing perhaps, Sebastian Vettel in the lead and fairly unpassable, just missed a turning point and drove off the track and let Button win. So I just feel like I need to add that right now.
So this is hailed as a glorious Jensen Button victory, but it's a bit more complicated than that. And I'm glad I watched that because I had to remind myself of it. Because at the time, I remember thinking, oh, that's quite a spawny win. And actually, he was a bit of a menace in that race. But it has been lauded as this great victory. So looking back on it, like he fully just drove Lewis Hamilton into the wall quite randomly. And maybe the commentators were saying, oh, he couldn't see with the spray. But he did. And it is not very Jensen Button-y to like just deliberately crash someone. But he did drive Lewis Hamilton in the wall. He stuck his nose in and was pointing not towards the next apex in turn 3 and took Alonso out. And of course benefited from the red flags and a safety car. And then actually that last stint though, Matt, I would say the last stint was really great. And he had to go through Webber and Schumacher to fight through. And yes, he was gifted it at the end, but it was still a good drive at the end.
Oh, yeah. I mean, there's no doubting it was a good drive. He wouldn't have passed all those people if he wasn't really specifically on it that day in that car. But it's funny how, to me, the little things, if Vettel hadn't done that, would we even talk about that drive in the same way? Possibly not.
And like you said, it was a foreshadowing because it was a really slow speed, weird spin. And it was the kind of spin that then plagued his Ferrari career as well. So he just kept, like 2017, 2018, he just kept having these really slow speed, just under throttle spins, which seemed to just basically throw away that championship. So that isn't the only win he's thrown away at the Canadian Grand Prix, Lucas. 2019, he threw away a win as well.
Yep. He went off. Well, was it the chicane? I don't know what.
It was the chicane before the hairpin, yeah.
True. And then he came back on the track. Lewis put his nose in. He said, Vettel said, I didn't see Lewis. And then he got a penalty and he swapped we all remember swapping the P1 and P2 sign afterwards. That was fantastic.
Yeah, that was
Vettel.
Yeah, he was in full meltdown mode. I have to say, right, go and watch that back. Go and search Canada 2019 Vettel penalty. It will definitely come up instantly because there was so much controversy about it. But he lost it on his own, another unforced error. And this is unfortunate. Like, unforced errors define Vettel's time at Ferrari, even though the 2019 car ultimately wasn't competitive because they were only allowed to use the legal amount of fuel per second or whatever it was into their fuel tank. Yeah, he lost it on his own, cut the chicane. Hamilton just driving completely normally. Vettel goes back on the track, ends up forcing him past the white line, gets a 5-second penalty for it, is not happy at all, and swaps the P1 and P2 marker boards. And look, Vettel's got previous for this. You know, he under the safety car in Baku, he drove his car to hit Lewis Hamilton, got a 10-second penalty or a drive-through, and they said, oh, you got a penalty for dangerous driving, and literally said, when did I do dangerous driving? When you used your car as a retaliatory weapon into Lewis Hamilton. So he definitely had form for that, Lucas. Like, as cool as everyone thought Grandad or Uncle Seb was for Aston Martin, he definitely is a fiery character.
True. It was in Mexico. He's pointing his finger at Max Verstappen. Oh, and to Charlie.
And yelling at Charlie Whiting, yeah.
It's
message
emotional, passionate. We call it passion.
There we go. I like that. But your memories, Jules, of the Canadian Grand Prix are like in antiquity. You've basically said the Canadian Grand Prix, Centurion Julius Montgomery with his Pilau and his Roman shield took a great victory in the 231 GP. Not that far back. You've gone to the 80s though.
Yeah, early 90s.
Early 90s, there we go.
Yeah, with Nigel Mansell botching a win.
Was that Montreal?
Yeah. That was Montreal.
Explain it. Explain it to us. Explain it.
So, context. I'll try to keep it short. 91 season, Ayrton Senna had won pole and the Grand Prix of the first 4 races, and arriving in Canada. All of a sudden, Nigel Mansell in this terrific FW14 had a shot at ending that streak by Senna, A lot of drivers dropped out of the race because of mechanical failures, the McLarens, the Ferraris, I believe. So Mansell was on a 50-second lead in the final lap, and he enters the hairpin, which we all know, and he starts waving to the crowd.
Oh, I remember.
You see his glove out of the cockpit waving to the crowd, and he stalls the car. He lets the revs drop too low, and the car stalls. And all of a sudden, you see him exiting the hairpin, and you just see he lacks the speed, and he's stalling. And Murray Walker, you can hear him like, "Oh no, Mansell's a stalled!" And it was Nelson Piquet who was, he's already gone in his mind. He was in his last season at Benetton. He's 50 seconds behind Mansell, and because everybody else failed to finish the race already, Nelson Piquet all of a sudden won his final Grand Prix because of that. And it was just a typical Nigel Mansell drama, breaking his own windows, that type of thing.
People forget how much Nigel Mansell absolutely loved the show and what a showman he was. Like if you think Alonso, because Alonso always says, my engine was on fire and I still won. It's the whole Magic Alonso meme. Yeah. Mansell was definitely like that, and he caught the passion of the Italian fans. He was El Lion-O, and he definitely like in Lotus, didn't he? Like he ran out of fuel, and then he got out of the car and he dramatically pushed it over the line, and then woe is me, he collapsed with heat exhaustion.
Yeah,
come on.
When Nigel went, drama was never far away, So and another one, can I slide in just another golden oldie? Because it's everybody loves the sound of the Ferrari V12s or V12 engines, and the Canadian Grand Prix in 1995, Jean Alesi in the Ferrari, the red Ferrari, carrying the number 27, the Gilles Villeneuve look, and he won his first and only Grand Prix that year at the Gilles Villeneuve track. And it was the very last victory for a V12 engine in Formula One. Ferrari were back then the only team still carrying a V12 engine. Everybody else had gone back to V10s, V8s. So I think that's for Formula One history, it's a pretty nice fact.
I honestly, when I saw in the notes that you'd gone back to the 90s, I thought I wasn't going to remember, but it's all flooded back. Lucas, I know you were trying to get in with Mansell as well, so feel free to go to either of those.
Well, you said Nigel Mansell was a emotional person, but can you remember? I think it was 1992 Canada, where he spun, and he acted like he was so hurt because he hit the gravel, and then he waited for Senna to come by, and he was like, pointing his finger at the side, like, it's your fault. And I really thought, whoa, what happened to Nigel? What happened to Nigel? Because I was young and I didn't know Nigel, so then I thought, wow, you're such a drama queen. But 1995, Ayrton Senna was actually the first time I cried watching Formula One because I was such a big fan of Nigel Mansell. And I still gives me goosebumps because the Dutch commentary said, well, the car is sticking together with tape, because if you look back to the race, there was tape hanging on the Ferrari.
Which year is this?
1985.
85.
Jean Alesi,
yes.
won the race. So he said, and Jean Alesi doesn't give a damn about the tape because this is his win. And that was, wow. It's, your first win is the best.
Oh man. Look, the thing is, when you're a kid, like all these races wash over you. So the fact that you guys have done some research and go, I remember that race. I had no idea. It was at the Canadian Grand Prix. And look, the track is an anomaly. Like there's no track like the Canadian Grand Prix. It falls in this mystical land between street circuits and proper Grand Prix tracks, if you like, in that the track itself kind of it's laid out and it's raced. It could be a bespoke track in the middle of a field somewhere, but it's not. It's surrounded by walls. The track surface is more akin to a street track. They always seem to run the lowest. So it's low wear, isn't it, Matt? Let's get into tyres. We'll get into a bit of Canadian Grand Prix stuff. My memory is from the olden days, of Prime and Option, that it was definitely a track that always favoured the softer tyres, or they went with the softer tyres.
Well, I mean, when you get into it, it's a street circuit because of the chicane-like nature and the hairpin. You're always going to need a good, what they like to call sort of more mechanical grip. And I think one of the things that people like about the circuit is it places it places a lot of emphasis on driver skill, and I think driver feel, because like turn 1, turn 2, that's sort of reminiscent of Brooklands and Luffield, where the driver makes a lot of the difference in looking at the tires. But I love that you bring up tires, because of the two memories I had, one was 2014, the Massa Perez collision.
That was huge. Go and look that up. Everyone go and look that up now. Massa Perez crash in Montreal. That was down the home straight. And that was, who, I think, was that Perez just steaming through? It was one or the other. I can't remember.
It was, well, Perez got the penalty for it. But the reason I remember it is because by now Twitter was a thing. And I believe there was probably 6 months worth of angry conversations with lots of diagrams, pictures with lines drawn on them.
Yeah.
That filtered through my timeline. And I always said to myself, like, how into something do you have to be that you would spend hours drawing lines to make your point about whose fault it was?
Oh, we've done
and that was clearly before we started this show.
Yeah. It was I think that was actually the first season that we covered, you and me, in fact, 2014, because I'll always remember it because of the double points Abu Dhabi decider.
Oh gosh, Abu Double.
Yes, because Hamilton was clear by more than a race win, but the double points thing made it so either driver could win, and Rosberg had a gearbox failure. But if Hamilton had happened to have that gearbox, it would have been the other way around. And that would have been, imagine, like, you know, Abu Dhabi 21, I think it would have been similar to that, the fact that he'd lost out because it was some weird double points thing.
There's no way for it to have not been controversial if that's the way it had worked out. But the other race, Canadian race, that we're not talking about, that we absolutely should, although I think Kyle might have referenced it in our last news show, is the 2010 Grand Prix, where Bridgestone brought entirely the wrong tires. The circuit was completely resurfaced, and then it rained right before the race, making the track absolutely green. And there was suddenly a multitude of tire strategies, a fascinating race. None of the team's strategists knew exactly what was going to happen till the last moment. There were multiple pit stops. And at the end of it, pretty much everyone agreed, like, geez, if we could only write Formula One regulations so that every race turned out like this, it would be the best sport ever. And that's exactly the brief that got handed to Pirelli. And it's why we see the racing we see today.
Yeah, I do remember that. Obviously, that was an extreme version, and then we had a period where we had chocolate tires that would be great, then gone, and we had the cliff. I missed the cliff.
You missed the cliff. Yeah. Well, interesting in 2013. That's where Pirelli tested the tires that came after the chocolate tires, because the previous race in Barcelona had been won by Alonso with a, get this, a 4-stopper.
Yeah. Yes.
And even they said, well, maybe that's a bit much.
Maybe that's too much.
But in 2010, like, a lot of people forget things that happen. Classic, Hamilton ran out of fuel in qualifying. He got out of his car and was pushing it down the back straight. And McLaren actually got a penalty for that, because he basically, they said, turn off the car, you won't have enough fuel for a sample. And the marshals helped him push it. Petrov. Do you remember Petrov at the start of 2010? Of course, everybody does. He got 2 drive-through penalties in the first 100 meters of his race. I'm just saying, it was a wild one. Go back and watch it if you can.
Canadian Grand Prix. Let's go back to the circuit. I love the fact that you compared turn 1 and 2 to Brooklands Luffield. It's similar. It's like a tighter version of Brooklands and Luffield. It's not quite as lingering. It's not quite as sweeping. But we do see good racing. I hope these cars can live up to it. But certainly watching that 2011 replay, such good racing into turn 1 and turn 2. And that's still in the DRS era as well. But yeah, so that's a great section. And then we kind of get into this Monza-esque section where we have chicane. And then the big hairpin, which I love. But why don't these chicanes irritate me as much as other chicanes on the calendar? Because Matt, you called out the hypocrisy, so stand by it now. Why am I right and wrong?
Well, I mean, I think it's because, all chicanes are equal,
Yeah.
but not all chicanes are equal, if you catch my drift.
They're not safety chicanes, are they? Like the old Barca one.
No, first of all, none of them are very slow speed. So that's one thing that you have going in your favor. They're all sort of a different amount of distance and time between the flip and the flop of the chicane. And because ultimately that kind of a thing in a track, especially a track that is bumpy, especially a track that might be rained on, essentially it's an error generator for the drivers. It's very hard for the teams to get it right because the not all the bumps are predictable. I don't care how many times they laser scan the track and run simulations, you're going to hit that bump and suddenly the car is going to go in opposite direction to the 9,000 times it did before and smash. You've got an error generator. You've got the wall of champions, or out of one of the chicanes, or as I like to call it, the wall of everybody's now, because it seems like everybody's crashed into it, right?
It's one of the oldest cliches, isn't it? This is what do you call it? This is confirmation bias. When a champion or a future champion hits the wall of champions, they go, "Oh, see, there it is again, the legend of the wall of champions." And then if Latifi hits it, they just go, "Oh, Latifi hit the wall." Like don't mention the fact that it invalidates the wall of champions thing. Let's not get rid of the magic of it though, because it is genuinely a turn that's an error generator, because it invites the drivers to be in on the limit, and then when they're just over it, Jules, they get stung.
Yeah, I think that's why you don't mind these chicanes as much, because I think every chicane, besides it being a bit fluid, having a flow, I think every chicane on that track has a wall beside it to punish you. And not a gigantic gravel trap.
Except for the one Vettel went over to get his completely justified penalty in 2019.
But the punishment to mess up the chicane is so severe. And in most cases, is this proper to say lethal?
Yeah, well, yeah. A wall at the end of fast things is generally potentially lethal, and that's an inherent part of motorsport. Thankfully, it has been mitigated a lot by the great work of the people who are pushing for safety in Formula One. So the overtaking, I'm hoping, will be less of an issue here, because you do have two big long straights, and I'm assuming they will both be DRS zones. I think we will get some interesting racing, because both of those DRS zones traditionally have they've let you close the gap up, but you've still got work to do into the final chicane and into turn one. So it is a race I'm looking forward to. I will say, in general, when it's completely dry, the Canadian Grand Prix, it's a little bit like Baku. In the complete dry, most of those races are fairly standard. And if it's a Pirelli one-stop, then you can reduce your expectations accordingly. However, I have a weather report, and I'm more than happy to hope for chaos, because on the Sunday it's saying 21 degrees, and it's saying 50% chance of precipitation, of moisture on the track. So I think that should be a lot of fun. It will, of course, I think it will mask the upgrades from, or how effective the upgrades are from Aston Martin and the previous Mercedes upgrades. I think Canada was always going to be unrepresentative anyway, so we may as well have a bit of chaos and fun in the rain. Thank you very much for tuning into Missed Apex podcast. If you are a Dutch speaker, go and tune into the Race Reporter. Where do we find that most easily, Lucas?
F1podcast.nl.
And and always in Dutch.
Always.
I listened to it and I was like, oh, the audio quality is really good.
Thank you so much.
I don't understand what they're saying, but it sounds, in Dutch, everything sounds sleepy and casual, but with an air of menace. And I liked it.
I'm thinking of maybe using AI and do the Japanese Grand Prix in Japanese.
Oh, I also won't understand that either. So that doesn't help me at all. But I hope you'll come back throughout the season and beyond as well. Maybe we can send a Missed Apex representative in the form of Jules Sagers. Go and follow him. Jules, why are you not tempted to get your pen out and start just writing some rambling F1 diatribes?
often feel like it, and yeah, I definitely still have this ambition.
An itch underneath. We'll see how that
definitely
goes. Go and follow Jules on Twitter. Links in the show notes below. Go and follow Matt at MattPT55. And your Mrs. Trumpets, old Amanda, she's still writing them books. She's still writing those romantic novels, Matt.
It has been a little while since a new one has been written, but she has one that's we're considering for re-release. It needs work, it needs effort, and it might be based in a sport that could be considered Formula One, except for copyright and trademark purposes.
There's going to be a Formula One drama film that's come out. It's been licensed. It's going to be a drama set around the world of Formula One. So that's real hot right now. I think we should get that going and do it in a male voice so that we can have a swarthy English narrator. That would be the plan. So look out. I am also recording currently an audiobook. So I'm hoping that if you enjoy a short fantasy story about someone using magic and stuff to like fight giants, then you will be tempted to go and buy an audiobook from Spanners. But until then, you will have to make do with the fact that we are going to be live for the Canadian Grand Prix around, I don't know, it ends at 9 o'clock. So maybe we'll go for an 11 p.m. start, which is why I've drafted in a largely North American panel. We'll have Matt, we'll have me, we'll have Christina, we'll have Antonia, but we will have your review ready for your Monday morning commute. So until then, work hard, be kind, and have fun. This was Missed Apex Podcast.